This is a mayor that believes in teaching children, that believes in especially teaching very young children. And we know from the story of Purim how effective and how important that message is. And that's a basic idea of his administration, and he lives with it every day. Thank you very much, Mr. Kenney.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for inviting me here again this year. What's been created here is just a wonderful network of people that can help each other make new friends, make new business connections, bring people who are not Jewish into the circle, and to do a good job for Philadelphia and for your own business and for your own workers. You've made valuable connections in this group that will not only benefit you personally, but will also elevate our entire community. And I'm sure that most people in this room can point to a partnership that was formed or a client that was picked up from attending one of these events. We all know that these personal connections play a huge role in growing a business. As mayor, one of my biggest tasks is to promote economic growth for our city. There is often a lot of talk about how Philadelphia is viewed as being anti-business. And I've heard those concerns, and our Department of Commerce is leading the administration's work to address them, along with City Council. Launched a special committee on regulatory review and reform to identify outdated and burdensome regulations that could be eliminated or changed. We're proud to see such active engagement from our business community on that committee. Commerce is also leading the way with a number of programs aimed to help businesses of all sizes, such as the Philadelphia Business Lending Network, which is increasing access to capital for small business, the expansion of the city's KIZs, which is helping the startup and tech communities here in the city, the Storefront Improvement Program, which supports neighborhood businesses, loans and access to other resources through our partners at PIDC, services like street cleaning and trash collection for targeted commercial corridors, which Commerce is helping to fund, and one-on-one assistance is available for business of any size in any industry and located in any neighborhood. The teams who work on business attraction and retention have seen an uptick in interest from businesses across the country and the world, for that matter, representing all industries. Now we have the opportunity to harness the city's current momentum and ensure that Philadelphia continues to succeed for years to come. As we continue to grow, I'm also looking for our business leaders to ensure that we do it responsibly. We don't want economic success to come at the expense of our most vulnerable residents. We don't want to see people priced out of their homes or have to have neighborhoods become a place where longtime residents feel out of place and they can't afford to live there. Our growth must be inclusive. We need to make sure that as companies open up shop in Philadelphia, our residents are prepared to take those jobs, that the talent pool is there. And that's why we started with early childhood education, to build a generation of doers and people who can accomplish things. We must ensure that we're doing as much to support small neighborhood businesses as we are to attract major firms. And we want to fight for a living wage for all Philadelphia workers, so that they can support their families and be active members of the economy. The more people make, the more they spend. And usually low-wage people who are making $7, $8, $10 an hour are spending that money. So anytime we can raise their hourly rate, they will spend it. So, I mean, they're not putting it in the investment accounts and the like. They're generally spending money on consumer goods. So I look forward to continuing to work with members of Philadelphia's many communities to make our city an even more appealing place to live, work, and play. And I just want to say that, especially to this community, what we've been hearing and seeing around the country and around the world, for that matter, is frightening. And a lot of it is being, I guess, not encouraged necessarily, but certainly not discouraged by the President of the United States. I don't know how anyone who lived through the Holocaust and World War II that may have been in a camp could have watched television and looked at Charlottesville and not have been terribly frightened and appalled that these idiots with the tiki torches are still causing this trouble and threatening the lives and people over religion. It's just amazing to me. And we're working hard with our Human Relations Commission, our police department, and our community leaders to make sure that we all kind of understand that we're all God's creatures, we're all human beings, we're all made by our God, regardless of how we pray to that God, and that everyone has a right to be here. And to practice their religion and practice their faith and practice their business in freedom without fearing for their public safety. So we're working hard to make sure. We've seen a rise in anti-Semitic graffiti, anti-Israel graffiti, threats against synagogues, the terrible tragedy that happened in Pittsburgh. It just, to me, is just, it's disheartening and heartbreaking to think that in 2019 we still haven't been able to get it, that we're all human beings, and we all get up every morning and go to work and try to raise our families and without having this nonsense, this divisiveness constantly in our lives. I remember when I was a kid, I'm 60 now, and I grew up in the 60s, and we had three networks of half-hour national news every night with very respected newscasters, but a half hour of news. Now, I think that the advent of cable television, social media, anonymous social media, has created this opportunity for people who hate to do so anonymously and to have that ugliness in our news feed 24/7, and it just really, really is disheartening. So I want to encourage you us all to stick together and to have each other's back and to treat each other with respect. And one of the things, I may have said this the last time I was here, but one of the great experiences of my life was growing up at 4th and Snyder in the 60s, where 2/3 of the neighborhood were Irish Catholics and 1/3 were Jewish. And the other thing that I've always recognized, that when I first went to the American Jewish History Museum, I went into the immigration section of the museum, and the ship's manifest was opened, and all the people's names and cities where they came from, Kiev and Minsk and all the places where they got on the boat, they got off the boat, and went to almost every entry is an address in my neighborhood where I grew up. And I had the opportunity to really interact with the cultural aspects of the Jewish community in my neighborhood, and got to know the stories and got to understand the history, and therefore was able to respect those folks for what it is what they accomplished, what it was they went through. There were a number of people in my neighborhood that had number tattoos on their arms. And I remember my mom saying to me, because I went to the dry cleaners, and the woman who gave me the clothes had a number. Women didn't have tattoos. It wasn't like I'd never seen anything like it before. And my mom said, and I told my mother, she said, well, you go back next time and you ask her. And she, in a very kind way, explained to me what she had been through. And those are the stories that people need to hear. I think part of the problem with the divisiveness of our country today is we really don't know each other's history, or for that matter, our own history. When I see an Irish or hear an American of Irish descent, angry about immigration, I'm like, dude, you wouldn't be here. What are you talking about? I mean, we were the dregs of Europe. We crawled off our coffin ships and went to our ghettos and tried to survive. At the same time, they were burning our churches down because the Irish were a plot by the Pope to take over America, which is what you hear about Muslim folks now coming out of our national government. It's a wonderful time. It's an encouraging time, but it's also a very sad time, and we need to be vigilant and not let this continue to seep into our psyche and into our public discourse. So with that sermon, I'd like to open up for questions if you guys have any. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for coming. From your perspective as a Jewish person, what do you feel each person can do to make a difference with all of the elders?
I think, again, history is important, and I think the knowledge of history is important. And when you have an opportunity to speak to someone that's been through terrible experiences and have come out the other end stronger, and what's his name? Mr. Greenfield. He had a clothing store up in a clothing factory up in, I can't think of his name, but he was interviewed. He had been in Auschwitz. He had been in a number of different camps. His father was killed a week when they marched people through the snow to bring them closer into the center of Germany, and he went to another camp, and his father had been shot by a Nazi guard like 2 days before, and they missed each other. But he had this joy about him that I could never understand. I could never understand how he maintained his joy, how he maintained his sense of humor, how he maintained looking at positive ways of life. And it's called The Measure of a Man is the book. I don't know if he's still with us, but he wrote a wonderful book. His story was that when he got to the camp, one of his father's friends from the village pulled him into the tailor shop and said, you must learn a trade, because if you're not useful, you're not going to be here long. So he learned how to be a tailor, and he was sewing Nazi uniforms and buttons on, so he learned the trade. So when he got to the United States, first of all, his camp was liberated by Eisenhower himself. And he said he was like this giant of a man that came and saved us all. Got to New York, went and worked at a tailor shop, worked his way up to the management. The people who owned the factory loved him, and they lent him money to start his own factory. And he became a major clothier in New York. So much so that he was making suits for many presidents. So he would make suits for Eisenhower, who actually liberated the camp. He made suits for every other president going forward, including putting Kevlar panels in President Ford's suit coat because he had been tried to assassinate him twice. And he said he used to leave little notes in President Clinton's coat pockets about international trade and politics and stuff. And apparently Clinton called him and said, you can't leave notes in my coat anymore. You have to, here's my fax number, just fax me everything. No more notes on my jackets.
If you don't mind, the follow-up question is, and what's happening is, I'm sure a lot of us have heard survivors speak. They're dying.
Yeah.
Soon they'll be dead. The millennials, the Gender X, they have no clue, and they just,
Yep.
a lot of, from my experience, what I've been hearing, a lot of them aren't aware of anti-Semitism, doesn't feel as extreme
Right.
as it is, and there's so many books written that the Holocaust didn't even exist.
Yeah. I just think it's continuing to tell. I mean, our generation learned from the last generation, and we need to teach them in this generation. I know the further we get away from the event, the harder it is to kind of make it real for people. I think that any type of documentary films and those kinds of things, even modern films that tell a story about people's survival and ability to survive. And I think that it's that way with every ethnic and religious group, is that we just don't know enough about why people from Southeast Asia are here. They're here because of our horrible policies back during the Vietnam War and the Cambodia and all that stuff. That's why they're here. They didn't want to leave. They were happy where they were. We were just bombing the crap out of their country and had to get out. And why other groups of people have come here over the years. But I do think that the more knowledge that our children have about each other, the more they're able to respect each other's contribution to our society, and that goes for the race relations, goes for religious relations, and ethnic relations. It's just constant education, and I think it's important. Yes, sir.
Trying to get a straight answer on this since the election. Why would the Republicans allow Donald Trump to run as a Republican president? And consequently, why would the Democrats allow Bernie Sanders, who's been an independent all his life,
Yeah.
to run as a Democrat for their party?
I don't know you can.
Why would a political party allow that type of thing and run as a Republican?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you could actually stop them. I mean, that's why we have the primary season. Nobody thought Trump was going to win, including Trump. And then he really didn't win. We have this quirky system of, as you know, electoral college. And when you lose by 3 million votes to still become president, something's wrong with the system. Bernie Sanders, again, I'm sure he thinks what he's doing is he's exercising his right to do that. And I'm really concerned about what happens in our primaries and who comes out the other end, because this guy could win again. I mean, I never thought I'd stand here after 2+ years and say he has an opportunity to win again. And part of the speculation is that he's trying to avoid the statute of limitations. He's trying to get within the statute of limitations so he can stay in office where they won't indict a sitting president. Because I think what's coming out, I mean, the collusion thing and all, it's terrible. I don't think it's the worst of it. I think the worst of it's probably money laundering and washing Russian mob money. I mean, the whole thing is just almost like a organized crime syndicate. And as much as I dislike him, Steve Bannon said, follow the money. If you follow the money, you'll wind up finding out exactly what happened. But I don't know if we can keep people from running or not. I mean, I love Joe Biden, and I don't know if he's going to run or not. But I'm worried that we give Trump an opportunity to make claims that the guy like Biden's passed. Beto O'Rourke's too young. Kamala Harris doesn't have enough experience. Because once that happens, there's no clear front runner for the Democratic side. So we just have to make sure that we get out and vote, and make sure that all our friends get out and vote, and that we don't play around like we played around last time. Yes.
Mayor, again, thank you for coming. What do you see as the #1 agenda item for the economic vitality of the city?
Education. I mean, it's. I just left a kindergarten up in Ronhurst Elementary School. Those kids are. I mean, I don't care what neighborhood you go into. I don't care what area of the city, how poor that area of the city is. I when you're in a quality pre-K or a kindergarten, our kids are really smart kids, and they're perfect almost. They're not spoiled yet. They haven't been ruined by by prejudice or by anger or by hatred. They're just, they're just loving children. And if we can get them reading at grade level by 3rd and 4th grade, graduating from high school and college, we're going to change the narrative of poverty in the city. I think one of the reasons why, and you could argue whether we wanted Amazon or we didn't. Personally, you could have an opinion about whether you wanted them here or not. But I think one of the reasons, and they didn't tell us why, but I think one of the reasons why we didn't get is I don't think the pool of skilled workers is strong enough yet here. And we're working on many different angles, from education to reentry to job training. Our workforce development folks are working hand in hand with our reentry folks. We need to get, we have a wonderful pilot program that was created by the captain of the 12th District in Southwest Philly, where he goes out with his officers, engages young men generally on the corner, and offers them opportunities to go to work, real work. And they put to work 60 young men in Southwest Philadelphia who didn't want to be in that drug trade or in that crime situation. But they have to, as they say, they have to eat, and they have responsibilities for siblings and for children, and they're going to make a living, and they're not going to starve to death. So if we can get them directed and trained to take a job that can raise a family and sustain a family and give them some dignity and some income, that's, I think, where we should be going. The International Longshoremen's Association, along with the Holt family, is creating a maritime skills training facility at Packer Avenue Marine Terminal. Those are jobs traditionally you don't need a college education or a high school education. You can make $40 an hour with benefits and pension. So that's the kinds of things we're going after. We have this terrible opioid and heroin crisis that we're dealing with. We had 1,217 souls pass away last year due to drug overdoses. We have an issue in our country relative to the availability of guns. I mean, you see what's happening in the Senate now. I mean, the House passes a background check bill that even gun owners don't have a problem with, and Mitch McConnell won't let it on the floor because there's enough votes to pass it. And that would have kept guns at least out of 3 people's hands, including the kid who shot up the synagogue and the kid who shot up the Baptist church in South Carolina. And that's what we fight all the time, because actually all of our crime, with the exception of homicide, is at a 40-year low. It's our homicide number that keeps ticking up because people have guns, and they have access to guns, and they're poor, and they're out struggling in the street to make a living in this drug trade. We've identified about 130 murders that were clearly caused because of drug activity. So that's, out of 351, 130 would have been a huge difference cutting that out. One is too many. I mean, we play this numbers game, and people complain the numbers are ticking up. It's up 12%. It's up. It's down 3. I mean, it's just when we get to a place where 300 is acceptable and you don't get criticized for 300 murders, I mean, that's crazy too. But we're stopping, and on the police community relations stuff, at the end of 2015, there were 271,000 pedestrian stops, many of them unconstitutional. At the end of 2018, we were at 78,000 pedestrian stops, and we're driving that number down. We have protocols that the police need to follow relative to their stopping a person in the first place. And ironically, even though we've stopped a couple 100,000 less people, we've tripled the number of guns we've taken off the street from 125 to 3 times that. So we're stopping the right people now, but it's just the availability and the ease of getting a gun. You get a gun easier than you get a library card. And everybody needs a library card more than they need a gun. So, yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Good afternoon.
I'm a Center City resident. I've got 5 children. 3 of them are Center City residents, married with children. They and their friends many of them are professionals. They make good living.
Right.
They form a wonderful tax base. But the dilemma that they have is continuing their education.
Yep.
The dilemma they have is they don't live within a certain catchment.
Right.
They're concerned with sending their kids to school.
Yep.
So I'm kind of looking beyond that. I think it's very important.
Yep.
And just looking at the city and saying if somehow miraculously there was funding for these neighborhood schools, these young kids, 30-year-olds with young children, they'd be staying in the city.
Yep.
Good incomes, good tax base.
It's our biggest.
What's the plans for that?
Well, $1.2 billion in new money for the schools coming from us. Over the next 6 years, we plan on spending $1.2 billion. $700 million of that is new money. We've been waiting for years for Superman or Superwoman to fly in from Harrisburg and save us, and from Washington to save us, and neither of that's going to happen. And despite the governor's best efforts, they're just not into funding education in Harrisburg, and that's a sad state, because if we did fund it, I know I was in Canada about 6 months ago or so, or last year, and I was talking to a government official there, and like a university like McGill, which is kind of ranked as high as the Ivy Leagues here, is $3,000 a year to go to a university like McGill. Now, if I had known, I would have sent my son up there, because my daughter too, as a non-resident, it's $10,000 a year. And how can they do it? I mean, we can do it. I think we're wealthier than them. So let me go back to the public schools here. People don't want to pay taxes, and I totally understand that. And people complain about the beverage tax, but the beverage tax is like Obamacare. So I saw Jimmy Kimmel show one night, and they sent a reporter out on the street, and they said to people randomly, "Do you like Obamacare?" They go, "Oh no, I hate Obamacare. I hate it. It's horrible." How about the Affordable Care Act? "Oh, I like that. That's good. That's really good." So the beverage tax is like Obamacare, and pre-K is like the Affordable Care Act. Everybody likes pre-K. Nobody wants to pay. Everybody complains about the beverage tax. People say to me, my assessments go up, and I'm really angry, and I'm moving to the suburbs. I said, well, good luck there, because you're going to pay 4 or 5 times the amount of real estate taxes you're paying in the city. And don't you want your property to be worth more than it was the year before, or would you rather have it be worth less? So we have to get the mindset that if you want a Lower Merion-style education, you're going to have to pay for it. We're going to have to pay for it, period. And I've seen some anecdotal signs of good things. I was at Jacobs Engineering moved into Philadelphia out on Chestnut Street, and I went to their opening, and a young guy come up to me. I said, I just moved from Atlanta, work for Jacobs. My wife's an engineer. She works for another firm, but we're buying a house in the city. And I said, where? He said, South Philly. I said, that's great. Why did you pick South Philly? He said, because I love Jackson School, which is the public school in his neighborhood. He said, I want my daughter to go there. We need to replicate that in every neighborhood in the city, and we're working hard to do that. Dr. Haidt has been doing a great job. We have a school board that's locally appointed now, so we have good people who are volunteering their time to oversee the district. But we have to develop in neighborhoods where there may not be as wealthy people, or may not be as solid middle class, may not be as involved in the school as we'd like them to be. We need to figure out ways to get people engaged in the schools again, and that's our community school model, where we have people that are dedicated to finding resources for that particular school, almost like a development officer for the school. And we want to replicate that, across the system. But we've had 3 years of sustained growth in test scores and in graduation rates, and that means that we're on the right path. I understand a young family's decision, because they're not going to sacrifice their kids' education in order to be an urban pioneer. But we do have them in the door to begin with, because they either go to college here or they get their first job here. And if you compare it to Boston, Washington, or New York City, this is a bargain to live. And you're right, they buy a house, they want to start a family, and then they start figuring out, where should we go? So we were cognizant of it. We're working on it all the time to make it better. But in the end, if you want a good education, we're going to have to pay for it. And I'd asked for a real estate tax increase last year, so we could get ahead of the economic problems we're going to have probably in 2 years at the district, and we're going to have to do something to raise revenue there. There's just not money laying around in the budget without having an infusion of revenue every now and then, so we can keep pace with it. We've had a strong fund balance this year. Our rating agencies are happy with us. We're putting money into the rainy day fund, which makes them very happy. And we're spending money in areas that we need. $80 million on affordable housing. We're upgrading some of the police, public safety issues, the fire department. We're putting back 7 companies that were eliminated during the Nutter administration. They're coming back, and new equipment. So we're looking at public safety, we're looking at education, we're looking at people gaining access to opportunities across the spectrum of folks. I understand that education, and people get angry at me, like, oh, we're talking about education. Well, that's really why we're in the situation that we're in, because people had not been educated for a few generations now, and that's why we have the social issues that we're dealing with. We've also been very successful in reducing our prison population. I mean, I remember when I was running for office, reporters would say to me, "Oh, like a radio talk show guy would say, you're going to buy land in the Northeast and you're going to build another prison, you're going to fill it up. I said, no, we're going to empty a prison and knock it down, which we closed the House of Correction. We're looking to close the detention center. We have 3,000 plus less people incarcerated. And I think that's all progress, because you can't lock your way up out of problems. And I had people sitting up on State Road that couldn't make bail. I mean, think about the nonsense of that, where it's about $140 a day to keep somebody locked up in our county prison, and the guy can't, doesn't have $500 cash to make bail to get out. The judge considered him not a non-risk, but he doesn't have family or a job, and he can't get out. So we wind up sitting there 6-9 months while we pay the tab. So we're continuing to reduce our prison population. We've decriminalized a lot of stuff. I mean, we decriminalized, before I became mayor, we decriminalized the possession of marijuana. I mean, we had 4,200 people a year being arrested for possession. And once you get that criminal record, that arrest record, I mean, you can't get a job. It's. I used to say if you wanted to arrest a lot of people for marijuana, you go down to the sports complex, any Eagles game, and any tailgate, and you can arrest a lot of people, but they'll all be white suburbanites. And the people we were arresting, 83% were people of color. That's not fair. It just doesn't work. Anyway, it's a long way around your story, but we are concentrating on investing in our education system, and we know it's going to work. Either one, young lady.
Two-part question. One is, do you think that there is the infrastructure in Philadelphia available to kind of move out of the meds and ed space and into more industries and more types of businesses that could be available besides Comcast? And number two is, what do you think about Jackson possibly coming back to the Eagles?
Let me take the first one. No, the second one first. Look, he's talented. I think he's talented. He can stretch the field. He can catch the long ball. He's fast. He's still fast. He hasn't slowed down. I think he was a little immature when he was here last time, and I think Chip Kelly was a little immature when he was here last time too. And he just didn't like him, so he got rid of him. And I think he understands his opportunity now to come back and to not reinvent himself, but re-inject himself into this team and this family. And I think that coach like Peterson and the rest of the senior player, well, he's a senior veteran too, but the other veterans on this team, I think, will embrace him, and I think we're going to have a great year next year. So that's on him. I think we're doing really well in tech. We're having a lot of startup companies, a lot of young people coming in the tech space, picking up these spaces in these work share offices, WeWork and others, and then moving out and into their own businesses. So I think that we should be training our children for the next 20, 30, 40 years in tech and all that. I mean, I'm not the best tech person there is. Every time I go talk to a tech group, I'm like, oh, I'm going to sound like an idiot. But they give me enough notes and I'm okay. But I think that the tech is the opportunity for us. Manufacturing is something that we should continue to pursue. And the meds and eds are our base. And so our universities are our base. We have some of the best hospitals, as you know, best research opportunities in the world. It's just that 25-point-something% of poverty that just is so maddening sometimes, that you see all these good stuff happening and then you turn and you're dealing with stuff that's frustrating and seemingly intractable. But I don't believe it's intractable. I think we can win it. Yes.
Building on that, first, thank you for your support of local entrepreneurship.
Thank you.
So on the topic of higher education and entrepreneurship, how can Philadelphia do better at retaining the talent that's coming to our universities from around the country and around the world?
We actually are doing better in our retention numbers. The thing that frustrates us is that if I were a parent in a foreign country, I don't know if I'd want to send my kid necessarily to the United States at this moment. And I think Canada will be stealing a lot of the folks that would have been coming here. We still do well in foreign students. I think how you retain them is by giving them a good quality of life, and then making sure that as they get older, as the gentleman in the back asked, that there's an opportunity if they decide to start a family, to send their kids to school in their own neighborhood. I think it's all interconnected, and we're working hard at it, and it can be frustrating.
What's the best part about being mayor? What's the worst?
Kids, children. I mean, children are the best part. I mean, I was having a horrible day yesterday. It was just a not rotten day. And I got up, went this morning to Ron Hurst School, sat in a little chair with kindergartners, and we were doing They were doing arid environments, so they were talking about different animals that live in the desert, and I wore a pith helmet, and it was fun. It was fun. I mean, it's fun, and we got our pictures taken, and kids were just joyful. That is the absolute best part of my job. The worst part of my job is adults who don't want things to work and just want things to fail for fail's sake, and that's what you have when you have anonymous social media. And I mean, my father just passed away in December, and it was a really tough time. And you never know. I mean, as the first parent I had lost, and I didn't realize the physical and emotional toll. I mean, I was physically ill for a couple months and painful. But my mom calls me and she says, I read Philly.com comment section. I'm like, Mom, why are you reading this? No, don't look at it. And then I have to I got to look at it because she's telling me about something that she read from some anonymous idiot who is saying vile things about people. And I've had this conversation with the Inquirer and Daily News many times. Why do you let that in? It's because of clicks that they have. Then their clicks determine their advertising rates, and they don't want to take those clicks off.
Mayor, with us being in the middle, I guess, of campaign season.
Yeah.
And you're reflecting on your last 4 years. Two questions. One, what grade would you give yourself?
Oh,
for the past 4 years?
that's not right.
And, and two, to a conversation you and I were having around budget for education.
Right.
You mentioned the 1.2 billion, 700 million in new money. Like, what's the gap in your mind in terms of how much money you think we need to get to the level that our kids deserve in this?
I want to get to the level of what is spent on average in the suburbs. I mean, I think that's fair for our kids. It's all about equity. I mean, the thing about, for Rebuild, for example, the Rebuild project, there are rec centers and libraries across the city that haven't seen a lick of improvement or renovation in 30, 40 years. And stuff's falling down. And I have a friend of mine who coaches Little League football. Ryan Boyer for the Laborers Union. He, one year, scheduled all his games away because the field that they played on was so horrible and so dangerous that he was embarrassed for people to, he was worried about his kids getting hurt, and he's also embarrassed about these suburban parents and teams that would come and look at this dust bowl that he was playing in a dilapidated field in a dilapidated rec center. So he takes his kids out to the suburbs, and they're all manicured fields. There's lockers and showers and scoreboards and stands. And his kids are like, what's our problem? Like, what's wrong with us? And that's why our children should go to a solid school that's comfortable and safe, have a solid educational opportunity, leave school in the afternoon and go to a library or rec center that's high quality, high class, and not leaky roofs or broken basketball courts or just a mess. I think that would bring more people into the rec centers and libraries to volunteer. I think it would enhance the experience for our kids. And I do believe that a kid living in a struggling neighborhood, if they have infrastructure that's top notch, they'll feel a little better about themselves, and they'll understand that there's hope and there's opportunity for me, and people care about me, actually. So if you're a 10-year-old and you're going to a crappy school, and you go to a crappy rec center and a library, and you're in a neighborhood that's struggling with crime and with other things, by the time you're 18 years old or so, you don't really, there's nothing to really care about. And we have to change that mindset, and we have to invest in things that will bring equity to every neighborhood in the city. And I don't know if I want to give you my grade or not. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to grade yourself. B+, I don't know. I mean, usually what I did, as my son used to say at Penn State, Dad, C's get degrees. I was like, you know what?
I wanted to say, when you were running for mayor the first time, and we did this mayoral campaign, and we had those 300 kids come out, and it was I think it was 5 of you running for mayor at the time. And all of the campaign promises you made to those 2nd through 5th grade kids, you have pretty much kept to. So I would give you
Thank you.
an A on
Oh, thank you.
you made in your follow-through.
Thank you. Did you score on the bell curve? Or? How about that scandal? Isn't that horrible? I'll tell you what. I'm never. I mean, just to go off skew for a moment. Really? I mean, like, it's if you want to buy, if it's bad enough you would buy a wing or a gym and your kid gets in. That's all right. I mean, that's the way things work. But straight out bribery. I mean,
You're gonna pay $1 million, and your kids don't need to go to college.
that's, yes, sir.
Yeah, let me fast forward Marcus's question. So it's clear you have goals, and you're going to be thinking about at some point in time your legacy. Which
poverty reduction. I mean, poverty reductions, it's just, it's hard. It's really a hard lift. And honestly, legacy, this may sound trite, but I don't think about my legacy. I think people should determine what your legacy is. I mean, I don't think it's for you personally to shape your legacy. I understand what your question is, but I don't really think about it. I mean, in the first term, and I don't think this is going to happen because the way things are shaping up, I should be okay. But if I didn't know I was going to be okay, and we funded education and passed the sweetened beverage tax and did all the things, and I lost, see you. I mean, I'm not going to. I'm not jumping off the Ben Franklin. I mean, I'll go do something else. I mean, I went to Florida for the weekend. I have to see my Phillies game, and Bryce Harper was there, and we had, it was just a wonderful little 3 days to get away. And I'm sitting on the beach in Clearwater and going, this is not bad. It was 80 degrees. I mean, I didn't have stress. I'm not planning on it. I mean, I'm going to go there eventually. I'll be on a beach somewhere in 4 or 5 years. And when you get, 60 is not old, but it's not young. I mean, you're getting to that section of your life, and then your dad passes away. So you start thinking about things in a different light, like, how many years do you have left, and are they going to be pleasurable, or are they going to be stress-filled, that kind of stuff. So.
I remember last time you were here, you, I think, told the story about Frank Rizzo, and you were with him in the long line, and he was offered to come up close. I think it was you. Anyway, and you talked about, like, when you would walk home. But the thing that I remembered you said, and maybe the message from him and others might be, people may forget what you say, and they may forget what you do, but they will never
Forget how you make them feel.
made them feel.
And that's why when you're,
What your legacy is.
that's why when it's late at night and I live in Old City, and Bray Street Cafe is my little place I hide after work to get a burger and decompress. And when somebody comes up to you at the table and it's 10:30 and you had it and they say, "Do you mind if we take a selfie?" You have to take the selfie and smile, because if you shoo someone away, they'll walk away and they'll never forget that you did that to them. So if you suck it up, put your arm around them, smile nice, and take the picture, they'll walk away and they'll have a picture of you that they'll always remember that you did. Because I had people come up to me on the street and say, when you were a councilman, you helped me do this, and I'll never forget. And I don't have a clue what they're talking about, but they do. They remember, and I think that's really, really important. And I'll tell you one story about Joe Biden. I was a freshman in high school at St. Joe's Prep, and I had to do a report. I had to interview an elected official. So I wrote to Joe Biden in Washington. He had just become a U.S. Senator. I think he was 32 years old. I think it was right after the tragedy, or right before the tragedy of his family's car accident. And his staff called my house, because we didn't have cell phones back then, so my mother had the rotary phone, and she got on, and she said that they called, that he can't interview you in his office because he's got to come back to Wilmington. But if you're willing to get on the train and go down to Washington, wait for him on the platform, he'll get in the train with you and go back to Wilmington. You can interview him there. And we did. And it was an unbelievable experience. And that was 40-some years ago. And I still remember vividly that experience. And I always appreciate him because of that. And when he was running, when he was trying to help Obama, when he was running with Obama, he was in Philadelphia for an event, and I got his ear, and I told him the story, and he said, "Oh, I remember." I said, "No, you don't remember that." I said, "It's not very nice of you to say, but you don't remember that, but I will never forget it." And that's true. You really have to remember that how people look at you is how you treat them and how you make them feel.
And that's your legacy.
I hope. Knock wood. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.